Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to In Theory video number 3. In this video, we're going to talk about Sepultura, the song Refuse, Resist. Now, you may be looking at me like, you got an acoustic guitar in your hand, we're going to talk about Sepultura. Yes. First of all, this particular guitar right now is tuned to D standard, which for this song, that's what they tuned to. Now, what's cool about this song is there's this idea in music theory, especially once you get into like the post-romantic period and further on into like the early 1900s, mid to late 1800s, early 1900s, you start getting into this idea of tonal center. What does that mean? Well, if your tonal center is, say, D, why does it become a tonal center? Because everything happening around it has something to do with D, but it never would settle into, say, like D minor or D major or D Dorian or any of that. It just never quite settles somewhere, but you can always get a feel for like, okay, that's home, but what's going on around it doesn't explain where we're going. Like, for example, like if you were to take something like this and write it in piano music, the key signature would be hard to put on there because you would constantly be taking these dives off and to say, maybe for a second you're like in D major, but then you're in D minor, but then you're in D Dorian, and then maybe you blend them in so that you can borrow chords from. So maybe you're doing a portion of the music that's in, D major, but for some reason you keep grabbing the 3 chord from D Dorian, and that would be confusing because it's in a different spot than where the 3 chord would be in D major. But it opens you up to be able to have more notes. And this is where you kind of start getting to where all 12 tones are on the table. Use them how you want. Okay, so the opening, one of the opening guitar parts, when it kicks off, is that. What that is the tritone. Tritone is awesome. It's always awesome when you're in metal. They're always awesome. But in the standpoint of theory, how did that tritone happen? Well, it's the flat 5. And in the last 2 videos we've talked about, the flat 5 is it's kind of like the leading tone of the 5 chord. And it's pretty common to hear it in a lot of music. Blues uses it a ton. And it's just very useful and sounds cool, especially in this case with Sepultura. That riff is awesome. I love it. I don't even know if you'd want to call it a riff. Okay, now the next part. So there's your D again. Still got your flat 5. Now we're doing it as a power chord. However, that is the 6 chord from D major. So now we're kind of blending, okay? We've got this flat 5 thing going on, which if you look at Lydian, for example, let's take a look at D Lydian. You've got a tritone there, and it's fine until you make it a power chord, because that note should actually be that. So what you're doing is just making it a power chord and kind of glossing over the fact that that one note doesn't belong. And that's fine, because it still gives you kind of the same vibe anyway. So the opening, let's call that, for fun, we'll just say D Lydian. Okay, that gives you that tritone. And then for the second section, it's like a blend of D Lydian and D major because you're using that chord. hit the cool D. That part of the song, friggin' awesome. Okay, now the next part of the song, when the vocals kick in, you got... Now this to me looks like a blend again of two forms of D. Of course, D is huge in this, right? Huge D. But the first iteration, that's like D Phrygian. But then you land there, which is the 3 of D major. So it's like you're throwing D Phrygian and D major together. So that's kind of how you end up with something like that. And that's how you get this idea of using a tonal center is, okay, Phrygian, well, let's grab that from the major. Okay? And this song pretty much all the way throughout is kind of grabbing things from... I would say, and I don't think they were thinking about it this way. I think when they wrote it, they're just like, this sounds awesome, let's do it. And I agree, it's friggin' awesome. What we're doing here is we're taking inventory of what's going on and kind of going, well, why does that make sense? Why does that work? Why does that work? Another way you could look at that segment, and I would argue against it, I would argue more for the Phrygian and major combination than this other thing I'm about to say. But if you think about it, you know, F minor, that would be the raised 7, the E, or the D, sorry. So, E flat minor, I forgot we were tuned down there for a second, would give you that, but it doesn't make as much sense. And then you'd have more, like, if in written music, you'd have even more accidentals that would make less sense. So I would kind of argue for more a blend of Phrygian and major. And then from there, you get... And again, you're blending, but to me now, it feels like you're blending more stuff. So from here to here is kind of something you'd get in minor keys a lot. That's from major or sharp 3, however you would want to think about it, you know. Remember, you can always have flats and sharps and stuff. To me, it sounds like you're kind of grabbing from major and minor there, and then grabbing that again from your Lydian, or just thinking about it as a flat 5. Now, you may be wondering, like, as we talk about this, why some things are so vague, where it's like, it could be, or maybe. Well, that's because music theory works that way. Why does it work that way? Well, you can't really read somebody's mind. So whoever composes something, you can only look at what they did and musically kind of step back and go, okay, with what we know from music theory, what makes this sound good? That's really what you're trying to figure out is, wait a second, that doesn't make sense, but it rules. Why? And that's kind of what you're doing when you take an inventory of a song and throwing music theory at it, is like, well, wait a second, why in this key center am I allowed to use this and that? Well, because you got D minor, and that's in D minor. Then you've got D major, and that's in D major. And then you've got D Phrygian, and that's in D Phrygian. So you're kind of going like D Phrygian, minor, major. Makes sense? It's kind of like, so you're using chords and notes from all 3 of those at the same time to get you that cool run there. So there you go. That's just a brief, Sepultura, Refuse, Resist, just taking an inventory and kind of explaining what I think is going on, or at least what I think makes it sound cool, or, you know, music theory wise, like, well, why does it sound cool? Because atonal stuff doesn't always sound cool. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, I could do without that. But then you hear something like Refuse Resist, which is considered atonal because it's really all over the place in a way. But then you take a step back and you're like, well, it's not really atonal. If anything, you know, it's borrowing these ideas from postmodernism of like, oh, why or not post-romanticism, where it's like, okay, let's put all the keys on the table. So we've got D. We know we can do D major, we can do D minor, we can do D Phrygian, we can do D Dorian. Let's put it all on the table and see what happens when we start blending things. And that's kind of what's going on here. But it doesn't, you know, hopefully none of this changes how you look at music. I don't want anybody to ever like write music thinking about theory only. The reason that I think about things this way, like Refuse Resist, for example, is take a step back and look at it, is then I can recreate that idea myself in one of my own songs. Like, oh, okay, so that movement was cool this way. And then if you know the theory behind it, then if you want to put a lead over it or something, it's easier because you understand the inner workings, so you know what to move where, when you need to. Anyhow, I talked too much on this one, but I hope you have a wonderful day, and go jam Refuse Resist like 3 or 4 times in a row. Have a great day.